At one time, Pixar Animation Studios was the crown jewel in Hollywood for its genre, the belle of the ball. Beginning back in the 90s with such breakthroughs as Toy Story and all the sequels that followed. And who could forget other entries? Brilliance like Finding Nemo, or how about Ratatouille or WALL-E? And even more recently, what about Up? Whether the films were produced before or after the acquisition by Disney, one thing is for certain. The Walt Disney Company and Bob Iger over the last several years have frankly run off a great deal of the talent at Pixar, so articles like this from TechCrunch come as no surprise. They claim, according to sources, as Disney pushes towards streaming profitability, Pixar will undergo layoffs in 2024. And if you believe what they've heard, they're going to be big. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video, not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. Make sure to join us every Sunday afternoon right here on Valiant Renegade for the live show at 6 p.m. Eastern, and check out the new merch store. We'll leave a link in the video description below. According to sources that have spoken with TechCrunch, it looks like Pixar is set to undergo some rather significant layoffs later in 2024. TechCrunch is claiming that they have heard from sources and that the company, either Pixar or Walt Disney itself, have confirmed what they had heard, and they say that while sources at the company said the layoffs would be significant and as high as 20%, or reductions that would see Pixar's team of 1,300 drop to under 1,000 over the coming months, Pixar says those numbers are too high. Rather, the studio said the number of impacted employees is still being determined due to factors like production schedules and staffing for future greenlit films. Let me add some thoughts to this one. You see, if something like this were to break and you tell the source and the company, Disney and Pixar in this case, that, hey, we're going to press with this, even if it is true, you're probably going to want to soften the blow and say, well, it's not going to be as bad as you're making it out to be. And we may find over the course of this year that it's exactly what TechCrunch is reporting. The studio stressed the layoffs are not imminent, but will take place later this year, as Pixar focuses on making less content. According to insiders, the Pixar layoffs include, but apparently are not limited to, a headcount that was hired for Disney Plus, or hires that Disney pushed on Pixar to produce for its streaming division, which, of course, has not yet turned a profit. And you've heard us talk about that problem many, many times. Disney's direct-to-consumer, primarily Disney Plus, has dragged itself down into about a $15 billion hole. That is to say that they have spent $15 billion more since they launched the service than they have produced. And as of right now, if Disney is going to make good on its promises for the last several years to Disney stockholders and investors and Wall Street at large, that means that Disney Plus is going to have to show some sort of profit, maybe if even only $1, by the time we reach the close of the fiscal year, which will be September 30th of 2024, 9 months from now. Pixar's Elemental was cited as one of the popular titles to hit the streaming platform in the quarter, alongside other Disney and Marvel releases like The Little Mermaid and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Elemental had grossed $500 million worldwide, Disney said, and was the most viewed film on Disney Plus in the quarter, but was initially considered a box office bomb and one of the worst debuts in Pixar's 28-year history. The film made up for its poor opening over time, but had followed other underperforming titles like Lightyear and Onward, which forced Disney to reconsider the release strategy. You see, I don't understand what we mean by performed well over time insofar as Elemental is concerned. Disney Plus is still not turning a profit, so we can say everything we want about what the viewership was on Disney Plus, but at the end of the day, the real recovery of capital expensed for this film was about $200 million, and that doesn't, of course, include marketing, which may have easily been another $100 million. That means the movie would have had to have grossed at least $600 million at the retail global box office just to cover that expense. There's nothing left for it on Disney Plus. Now, sure, Disney Plus can do what Disney Plus always does, and that's to get out that $15 billion in debt credit card, swipe it one more time, and pay Disney's own entity, Pixar, say maybe $50 or $100 million for the rights to stream Elemental on its own streaming service in perpetuity. It's basically just a cash shuffle. It's nothing like actually licensing films out to places like Amazon Prime or Netflix. Just ask Universal and how many times they laugh all the way to the bank each and every year after they collect those checks from those two big streamers. Pixar's Onward released in March of 2020 and had run into issues due to the start of the pandemic, but Soul, Luca, and Turning Red were released directly to Disney Plus. The problem they may be missing out on is that none of those movies were particularly good. They were all devoid of most any kind of heart and soul. And like we mentioned in the intro of the video, Disney has run off far too much of its talent over the years, namely the guy that made Pixar what it was, and that's John Lasseter.
To make a great film, I believe you have to do three things really well. Tell a compelling story that is unpredictable, keeps the audience on the edge of their seat. You populate that story with really appealing and memorable characters, and put that story and those characters in a believable world. Believable for the story you're telling, not realistic. We're not interested in reproducing reality.
See, that attitude isn't there anymore. Disney seems to be more hell-bent to see how much representation they can squeeze into a film. We know this because it's in Disney's corporate mantra, and it's also one of the things that we see most frequently referenced by Disney reviewers or major Hollywood trade reviewers. Don't believe me? Just look at the release of Marvel's Echo this week on Disney Plus and Hulu. Look at how many reviews didn't have too many nice things to say about the story itself, but sure were enamored with the amount of representation that was in the show. Disney had more or less trained audiences to expect big, hot Pixar content at home, explained Brandon Katz, an entertainment industry strategist at Parrot Analytics. Quote, retraining the audience to re-embrace the theatrical experience and prioritize that takes time. I'm not so sure about that. You know, that's a family and general entertainment type set of films from Pixar, things that a lot of kids go see. I didn't see a lot of issue with Super Mario Brothers, or how about Barbie, or even Puss in Boots, which came out at the end of 2022 and did better than Elemental at the box office, and that was after that movie released 17 days on streaming from the point that it was put out in theaters. And of course, that movie had a budget that was half or less than half of most of the Disney animation and Pixar fare. Katz also noted that Pixar has had to contend with other challenges in audience behavior and preferences, mainly the fact that they're preferring to go watch animated features from other studios and not Disney. For example, audiences in the 2010s preferred pre-established intellectual property, which is requiring less marketing and less buy-in from consumers. But now audiences are facing sequel and franchise fatigue. I am sick and tired of hearing that particular ignorant statement from so-called industry experts. People are not fed up with franchises and sequels. They don't have fatigue for those things per se. What they have a fatigue for is crappy filmmaking and crappy storytelling, because all of the remakes, the reimaginings, the live action adaptations, and the sequels that have been coming out by and large the last several years have generally been awful. And that is especially true for the Walt Disney Company. The pendulum swing has been hard for all studios, Pixar included, to keep up with, Katz added. If you look at their box office history, 2017's Coco was their last megabucks box office original, meaning surpassing 500 million plus worldwide. And as we have laid out by the numbers over the past 12 months, Disney is having a rough time doing that with anything these days. Earlier in 2023, Pixar laid off 75 positions, including 2 executives behind Lightyear. Yeah, I wonder why. Turning streaming into a profitable growth business was a top priority Iger cited for 2024. Also this year, Disney Plus will gain Hulu content in the U.S. in another bid to boost its streaming business, mirroring other consolidations among its peers. And that's going to be the hat trick right there for Disney. You see, it's not that they're really going to get Disney Plus on its own to profitability. That, to me, still seems very unlikely. In fact, the only way they can hope to get there is to have advertising revenue significantly increase between now and September 30th, while at the same time continuing to slash budgets and cut content and programming that is going into production now for the streaming service. The best hope for the Walt Disney Company to get its direct-to-consumer, minus, of course, ESPN Plus, which is how they're calculating it now, is effectively bringing in the profits from Hulu to cover up the losses of Disney Plus. The bin of excuses for failure at Pixar and many Disney studios like Lucasfilm and Marvel is running on empty. The creative talent pool at the Walt Disney Company is almost dry. And unless the Walt Disney Company decides to go back to its old ways of doing things, and by old ways, I'm talking about just maybe 10 years ago, where they actually had real creative talent and let them do their thing without pushing politics and social agendas into almost every single studio and production that they have. When you start putting things besides the best storytelling first, you're going to wind up at best with mediocrity. And mediocrity right now for the Walt Disney Company would be a step up. I think the layoffs at Pixar, if this article is correct, if the source for TechCrunch is accurate, are probably going to err to the higher side of that 20% figure. It would not at all surprise me if it may even exceed that. I have posited many times that it's probably about that point when Disney needs to start looking at consolidating Walt Disney Animation and Pixar into a singular studio, because there's no difference between the two of them anymore. Do they really need 2 very expensive corporate hierarchies to run these 2 things? Or can they bring it all under one banner? Because quite frankly, the most valuable part of Pixar is in its past. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.